Welcome to the Latino podcast, where we discuss the intersection of law and our Latino communities with legal, political, and community leaders and visionaries. Let's get started.
I'm John Gomez, your host for the Latino podcast, where we bring together Latino lawyers and leaders to talk about the intersection of law and our Latino culture. This episode is brought to you by Gomez Trial Attorneys, a personal injury, employment, and civil rights law firm located primarily in San Diego, but having a presence all over the country. We are one of the largest Latino-owned personal injury, consumer, and civil rights law firms in the country. I'm pleased to introduce to you today a good friend of mine who is our guest, Frank Guerra. He is a capital partner at Guerra LLP. He has over 25 years of experience as an attorney and is board certified in personal injury trial law by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization. He and his firm, feature some of the really top litigators and lawyers in the country. And he's also a very good friend of mine. We actually had the opportunity to try a case together here in San Diego some years back. And so it's my great privilege to have this conversation with you today, Frank. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, brother. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you grew up, like where you come from, what your story is.
I grew up on the Texas-Mexico border, a little place called Stark County. In Stark County, there were two little cities, if you want to call them that. They were really towns, 4,000, 5,000 people each, very rural. And right across the river is Miguel Alemán, Tamaulipas. And so grew up on the border. Then when I went to college, I went to Texas A&M University in College Station. And man, at that time, that was like the biggest place I'd ever been. And if you've ever been there, it's not much. So when I went to law school in Austin at UT, man, I thought I was in another country. So grew up in a very rural place. My dad's dad was in the concrete business. So I grew up in the concrete plant. My mom's mom was a rancher and also worked for the federal government. And so I was largely raised by my grandparents because my mom and dad were only 19 when they had me.
Wow. So how did you find your way to Texas A&M and then ultimately to law school at the University of Texas?
It's interesting because, we had about 180 kids in my high school class in 1988 in Roma High School, but only like 4 of us really went to college. A lot of them went to community college, maybe 10 max. And then those who went to college before me mostly went to, back then it was University of Texas Pan American, which was in Edinburgh, Texas. I had a baseball coach who I didn't know then was kind of part of my destiny. I made the varsity baseball team as a sophomore. And one day he just kind of said, "Hey, I'm going to pick you up Friday and we're going to take a drive." And I said, "Man, I got to work at the ranch." He's like, "I already talked to your grandfather. Don't worry, I'll pick you up." So he picked me up. We drove straight from Starr County to College Station, but we stopped en route in a little brewery called Shiner. So back then, he bought me a 6-pack of Shiner, what is now Shiner Blonde. Man, I thought it was the worst crap I'd ever tasted in my life. He took me to College Station. We saw it on a Saturday. He then drove west to Austin, which was, UT, and he said, "Be clear, you will go to one of these 2 schools or you will not play baseball for me." So early on, he said that's the standard. And then when I was a senior, I was blessed in that I did well. I was a valedictorian in my class, and the question is which of those two schools is going to offer me the most money. But then a funny thing happened because Top Gun came out, and so I thought if I went to A&M, they offered me the same amount of money. I could be in the Corps, I could wear a uniform and get all the chicks, and also not have to buy clothes. So that's how I ended up in College Station.
Oh, very good. That's quite a story. And so, this baseball coach took this interest in you. I have behind me, there's actually a mural. There's me that was painted by the father of one of our lawyers here. She grew up in Juarez and then had to cross over to El Paso because her dad got a little sideways with some folks down there. but she had a priest that took an interest in her. You had this baseball coach. Like, what do you think he saw in you?
It's funny because shortly after that, I also had a priest who was also an Aggie. I ran his youth program for him all 4 years when I was in high school. And, my wife was an Aggie. When we got married, that Roman Catholic priest, Father Roy Snipes, drove all the way to Waco, Texas to marry two Aggies with a full Aggie court. That's how much he was an influence too. But Ricky, going back to Coach Bettis, he did this for me and another guy. And since then's probably done it for 30 kids as he rose in the administration. He was an Aggie, and he came from a family that was they were full of educators, and so he just kind of made it his mission to help people out. And we clicked early, and he just took me under his wing, man. I owe him everything.
That's super cool. Is he still around?
He is, and young, and he still comes and tries to play golf and whips my ass, and all that kind of crazy stuff. Still has all sorts of attitude. When I was a senior, he was in the Corps. When I was a senior at A&M, one of my great honors. So senior cadets are the only ones who wear knee-high boots, and I wore his boots that he wore back in 1974.
Oh, wow.
And so then when I graduated, I had those boots refurbished, and then I put them in a glass case, which sits in his office to this day. He's still very close to my family, to the boys. She's mom and dad all the time back home. Just fantastic.
That's super cool. You keep referencing the Corps, and some of us know about the Corps at Texas A&M and what that is. What is that? So, because some of the people may not know.
Yeah. So the Corps is the Corps of Cadets. Texas A&M, although now it has 60,000 students, I think, was founded first as a agricultural and mechanical school, but it was also a military school. And for many years through World War II and all of the eras that followed, it commissioned more officers into all four of our branches than any other institution. And so since when Ricky Bettis went to A&M, it was an all men's school and everyone was in the Corps. If that's what I was going to pick, by golly, you better be in the Corps of Cadets or Ricky Bettis would not be happy with you. The other part was, I didn't really know what to do back then. So I was actually an aerospace engineering major. And I had a fighter pilot slot to fly F-15s to the United States Air Force. And then in between my sophomore and junior year, we bombed Kuwait. And all of a sudden, we didn't need as many pilots anymore. So all of my upperclassmen that had pilot slots started having them yanked, and they were giving them options like, intelligence or something. I said, man, I don't want to do that. And so that's how I ended up deciding I was going to law school.
Wow. And so, you first became a member of the Texas Bar in what year?
1996, November.
All right. And so you're a kid from South Texas, from the border. You're looking around. Like, what does the profession look like in terms of, today we call it diversity. How white or not white or brown or not brown was the bar back then?
So it all depends on where you lived, right? Texas is still very geographically heavy, except for the metropolitan areas, right? But the general rule is the further north you are, the more white Anglo-Saxon it is. As you get south of San Antonio, there's still a lot of rural area for farmers, but it's very, very Hispanic as you get on the border and even 100 miles north of the border. So if you look at the bar in Austin, which is where I was in law school, it's pretty diverse. You start going south to San Antonio, a little bit more Hispanic, but not so much. You go to Corpus Christi, where Watts is from, believe it or not, very Anglo. For some reason, Nueces County and Corpus Christi was different. But every single other South Texas venue was predominantly all Hispanic. Raza from back home that went back home.
Oh, wow. And so, like, where did you first start out? What were you doing when you came out of law school?
So it's really interesting because it's really, what was I doing when I started law school, which I think started this trajectory. Paige and I got married after undergrad before law school, and man, I needed a job, but they said you can't work your first year of law school, but I had to, and there's no way we would make it anyhow. And I didn't know anybody, but Daddy graduated, just interesting fate, right? Graduated with a guy. He says, "Hey, I know a lawyer. Let me call to see if he knows in Austin." Well, that lawyer was a guy named Beto Munoz from McAllen, Texas, who was a Harvard guy. And his partner was a guy named David Hockham. And David Hockham had said, "Hell yeah, I got to go see an old boy named Dickie Gray." And so I walked right south to the law firm back then of Spivey, Grigg, Kelly, and Nisley. And Dickie took me under his wing. And I worked for them all 3 years. So when I was graduating, Paige is from Waco, Texas, right? She decided, look, man, you have great grades. You interned for the Supreme Court. You worked for a great law firm. We're not going back home to South Texas. And I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, we're going to San Antonio. I want the kids growing up with both grandparents. And I said, man, I don't know anybody in San Antonio. Are you freaking kidding me? So there was a young kid that was working with us at the law firm. He was an undergrad. And I said, man, dude, can you get me a recommendation for a law firm in San Antonio? All I want to do is try cases. Give me 3. And he wrote something down. And I looked at the paper and it said Plunkett, Gibson, and Allen, Plunkett, Gibson, and Allen, Plunkett, Gibson, and Allen. I said, do you want to give me some choices here? He goes, nah, the Allen guy's my dad. I said, can you give me an He said, sure. So I didn't know anything about anything other than I wanted a job. And so they were an insurance defense firm with a very strong presence in San Antonio and Austin, but no presence in South Texas. So I said, I'll try all your cases in South Texas. And they said, dude, are you a glutton? We're a defense firm, and defense firms get killed down there. I said, nope, I know how to talk to juries. And so for 5 years, I worked at a defense firm, trying cases almost every Monday in South Texas and just getting my butt kicked until tort reform happened. And then I started winning. I started winning a lot. And I thought it was because I was a fantastic trial lawyer, right? It's because the state of Texas was becoming a little more conservative to include South Texas. And so that's how I ended up with those guys. They threw me in the water. They let me swim. They let me try a bunch of lawsuits on my own. And it was fantastic. And the very first lawsuit I tried was against a guy named none other than Michael Watts.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And so is he more senior to you in law?
Yeah, he's a child prodigy. Graduated from high school in 2 years, law school in undergrad in 2 years, law school in 2 years. Was clerking for the Supreme Court before he was 21. And so, although he looks older, and I think he was only maybe 4 years ahead of me in law school. I'm sorry, 4 years ahead of me in age. He was like 7 years ahead of me at being a lawyer. He'd already been a lawyer for 7 years by the time I graduated from law school.
And is the next chapter you're working with him?
So what happened was the boss, big tall guy, right after I graduated, after I got my bar license, said, "Hey man, Mr. Badass mock trial guy, Mr. Neiman Cup guy. It's awards they give for advocacy at UT." I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "Hey, you want to go draw a case with me?" I'm like, "Sure." He goes, "It's in Laredo and it's a double death case." I said, "So?" He goes, "Yeah, I'll go try it with you." And he goes, "Michael Watts on the other side." I said, "Who's Michael Watts and why do I give a crap?" So we go down there, dude. Michael and I almost get in a fist fight in the first pretrial hearing. It was just blood everywhere, dude. We try the case for 2.5 weeks. Bobby tells me the night before, "You're giving closing argument." And I tell the jury to give clear liability. Our guys are drunk. I tell the jury to give him $2.7 million, 5 kids, no mom. And Michael asked him to give him $60 million. And I was certain I was going to lose my job after that trial. So the jury gave him exactly what I told him. We went home. I thought I was going to get fired because I thought I lost. And then that following Monday, Watsy walks into my office. I'm like, "What are you doing here, man?" He's like, "Hey, dude, there's this guy named Brian Harris. He's with Paula Wyatt. He's going to leave, and I'm going to leave my guy, David Perry. We're going to start our own firm. We'd be honored if you'd be our first associate." I'm like, "Man, I'm flattered, but these guys are really good to me, and I just started." He goes, "The only thing is I can't pay you a salary." I'm like, "What do you mean you can't pay me?" Because it's all eat what you kill. I'm like, "I owe him loyalty." So for 5 years, I stayed with the firm. And every time Michael would, pop somebody, I'd call him. And every time I'd pour somebody out, he would call me. And at year 5, Ford Firestone happened. And I said, "It's time." And he goes, "Okay." I said, "I bring my 5 guys." He goes, "Nobody said anything about 5 guys." I said, "I bring my 5 guys." And that's when we started in April of 2001. Back then, Harris and Watts, which then became Watts Law Firm.
Oh, very good. And, obviously, you guys had an amazing, very successful run together. But now you're doing your own thing. And I've worked with a bunch of your lawyers pretty closely. We continue to have cases together. And, my impression is your lawyers are all very, very earnest, very hardworking, very focused, very dedicated, and really, the top of, the tier of, what they're working on. How have you been able to cultivate that kind of team at your law firm?
Well, back even when Michael started the firm and when my name first went on the door in 2009, it was Watts, Guerra, Kraft, Hunter was the Kraft part. And for a long time, we didn't hire any associates and we didn't even hire lawyers that didn't have at least 5 years of experience. And a lot of our lawyers came from defense firms, Fulbright and Jaworski and people like that. Because our business model, like yours, Gomi, has always been, look, if you're a lawyer in America and you have a case that's too big for you, too expensive to fund, or you don't have the people to work it, or you just don't have the balls to try it, send it to us, right? No one was going to do that unless you had a stable of badass trial lawyers. Ultimately, they wanted Michael and I to try the case along with the partner, but the partner's going to do the workup. And so our model has always been to be that caliber of lawyer, not only ourselves, but also our partners and even our associates. When Watsy started doing more mass torts, and then when he moved to Puerto Rico, although we had a joint practice, we didn't do anything together. He did all the mass torts with very few exceptions. I did the class actions and the antitrust stuff, but my folks still did what we always did. And so I needed to have the Mark Fassels of the world and the Jorge Matises and Shalimar Wallaces that I could say, take this case and run. I'll see you at trial. And so it's just the model that we have here. And these young associates that are getting to try the smaller cases, the $500,000 ones, they know your job is to get in there and throw punches and let me figure out the rest.
And so, you're in a very particular market, especially as you've described kind of the geographical segregation within your state. Do you find that, and you guys have like a very strong bench of basically Mexican American trial lawyers, from Texas. Do you find that kind of cultural background and, familiarity with how things work, does that help you in terms of being lawyers or getting clients?
Oh, absolutely, Gummy. Especially in South Texas, but even, in the main markets, folks that are in the business of getting cases and referring them, right? Have to have a certain level of trust that the person that they're referring the case to will, first of all, not do something stupid like steal the fee, but also their reputation is with the clients, man, that the client is going to feel like they were treated like kings and queens. And the referral lawyer or the joint venture partner is going to feel that way too. So Hispanic people are very cultural, and you know that, right? So if you've got, some guy or a girl from Laredo, Webb County, and they have a great big case, the last thing they want to do is send it to somebody who they believe will look at them as lesser people, right?
Right.
As not as accomplished. You know what? You went to some law school versus Harvard versus UT versus something else. And so the cultural part of that transcends that stuff, especially if you're a kid from the valley like me, right? If you sell humility, if you sell, I'm just the same vato I've always been to people back home and you prove it, they're always going to be more comfortable sending you a case versus Thomas J. Henry or the Maloneys or some of those guys that they just don't perceive the same. And by the same token, their clients are Spanish speakers, right? They want to walk in and instead of needing a translator, they want to walk in and say, ¿Qué piensas? Yo soy tu abogado, or, anything. So absolutely, it's an advantage.
And so, historically, we've kind of heard, maybe from some populations, hey, I've got to be better than everybody else, or I have these, ceilings or limitations on me because of who I am or where I'm from. Like in your state and in your market, I mean, is it actually, do you believe an advantage, to come from that background and have that cultural and language capability?
So two things, right? If you feel like If you're asking me, do we feel like we have to work harder and better and almost a chip on our shoulder from where we came from? That's one question you're asking. Or second, you may be asking me whether being from that background has helped me identify with clients more. Which one of those two are you asking me, or both?
Let's do both because I like them both.
So I think without a doubt, there's that mantra. I think Emmett Smith said it at one point: all men are created equal. Some men just work harder, right? I think if you don't have that chip on your shoulder, thinking you have to do it better because people may think lesser of you, people may think, you know what, remember when I first went to law school, someone said, and I've never really faced discrimination, thankfully, Gummy, but someone said, oh, well, did you get here through affirmative action? I didn't even know what that was, right?
Yeah.
What is that? And he said, blood. I said, no, dipshit, I got here because I was a valedictorian of my class and graduated with top grades from Texas A&M University. But I didn't know that, right? But if you don't have that chip on your shoulder, then you're going to lose your edge, right? You can never take anything for granted, and I think that helps you work harder. That's number one. But number two, I think that when it comes to what we do, the second you lose empathy for your clients, then that's when you lose passion, man. That's when you lose the ability to just give every ounce of everything you have when you have nothing left to give. And when you come from a nothing background, right? When you come from a trailer house where you grew up in, where you had to work in the fields, right? And you had to have free lunch. You didn't know why it was free. You learned later because you were a migrant. Then you see that family sitting across that just lost their daddy and have no other source of even making a living. I think that makes you fight harder, no doubt.
100%. Let me veer off topic because I was laid up a little bit sick this weekend, so I was watching a lot of Netflix. And one documentary that came up was the story of Johnny Manziel. And so I'm wondering, did you ever get to see him play live at Texas A&M?
I did get to see him play live.
As a freshman or a sophomore or both?
As a sophomore.
Okay.
The year he won the Heisman.
Yeah, he was a pretty good football player.
Man, dude, it was like watching a video game. It was the craziest thing ever to see him out on the field. Now, look, when he played for Kerrville, I got to see him play a little bit too because Alamo Heights, my boys' high school did real well, and they were in our district.
Oh, is that right? So you saw him in high school?
And I saw him, and I saw film of him in high school because he was always in the highlights, right? He was Mr. Texas football, but even back then, he seemed to have a level of speed different than every other player on the field. It was like I said, he was on expert level, and the rest were at beginner. But never in your life did you think that would translate to collegiate level. But man, it did. I mean, that dude was just crazy, crazy skilled, fast as hell too.
And so when they beat Alabama their first year in the SEC, were you a happy guy that day?
Oh, dude, I was beside myself. I was at a select baseball game playing the championship for my middle son who was on the mound and watching that game and listening to that game at the same time. Dude, I thought I was going to implode just because I was so nervous, right? As a daddy, dude, you never get me a CEO of the Ford Motor Company or anybody. I'll cross-examine him on the stand. I won't even blink. But man, your kid on the mound, that's nerves. And very close to that is Johnny Manziel in Alabama football and Texas A&M, dude. I was about to have a heart attack.
Yeah, it's a good story. He was a really remarkable presence. And so like, how many boys you got?
3 boys.
Are any of them have legal aspirations?
I get asked this a lot. My older boy went to Texas A&M Kingsville, which is it's a very agricultural school. He's always wanted to be outside, owns a bunch of machinery, drives a flatbed dually pickup, has a handlebar mustache. That kid is going to work on a ranch, run a ranch, own a company all his life. The middle one, I kind of always wanted to, I thought, be a lawyer, even registered for the LSAT or LSAT class, then decided maybe MBA. He graduated last December from undergrad, A&M, and he decided now he wants to do commercial real estate. The baby is a sophomore at A&M, and man, that dude just wants to sit in my chair now.
Oh, good.
So I think he will probably go to law school.
Oh, very good.
We'll see. He's got a long way to go.
Yeah. And so it's funny because I've got 3 older kids. I got 4 kids, one very young, but 2 of my 4 worked in the law firm. this summer and continue working in the law firm. And they really came to it, they're still in high school, so they're not that old, but they came to it, in my mind, somewhat late, because prior to this, they had absolutely zero interest in everything but law. And all of a sudden they seem to be somewhat interested. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah. Gomi, you always think that you work really, really hard to do what we did, right? And rise to the level that we've risen. And to the kids, I think that's almost a turnoff when it comes to them
Yeah.
being lawyers, right? I've heard stuff like, well, Dad, I don't want them to think that I am where I am just because of your name. I've got an intern program here called the Grasshoppers. I run about 20 interns every year, all year. Half of them are in law school, half of them aren't. And I've offered to the boys to come do it, and they don't want to. All of their friends have done it, and 6 of them have ended up in law school. But the boys just have this thing about them that they don't want to feel like they got an edge just because of me, just because of my name. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I tell them, I've worked my entire life to get you that edge. Don't take it as anything other than you're just going through the door that I opened. That's it. What you do with it is up to you.
Yeah. 100%. And I don't expect that if your boys showed up in your grasshopper program that you go super easy on them or they get special privileges.
Hell no. They should certainly know that. I know the staff certainly knows that they're expected to not only be treated exactly the same as anybody else, but the standard is even higher. Don't screw up.
And so, where you're out in Texas and kind of looking nationally, what would you describe as maybe some important places where, law and our Latino culture and heritage and people might intersect in an important way, like in the coming years or now, or how do you see it?
Gomi, if you'd have asked me this 10 years ago, my answer probably would have sounded like we're seeing more and more Latinos everywhere, in Minnesota and Chicago, in places that are traditionally really white, like Phoenix. And because as in the judiciary, federal and state. And so I think over time, any potential biases that would have existed because of our ethnicity are going away, just like everything else. We're earning it, and we're earning it the right way. And then about maybe 7 years ago, I tried a case in Phoenix, maybe 10 years ago, when that crazy sheriff was trying to.
Joe.
Yeah. And dude, it's the first time I ever felt that a jury was looking at me differently because I was Hispanic, even though my client was a quadriplegic who's the whitest dude on the face of the earth. And now I have to admit, but even in San Antonio, the thing that's happened since COVID, since social media, since Trump 1 and Trump 2, where people are now taught that it's okay to openly hate somebody just because they disagree with you, is that jurors are getting real smart, man. And they know what not to say. And I can look out into that audience, and in spite of my success, my ability to speak clearly, I know there are jurors, even here in Bexar County and even in South Texas, who are thinking, you're a very part of the immigration process of the crisis that we're fighting right now. And I think that whole deal has given us a different problem. And that is that I think they subconsciously, confirmation bias, if you will, are getting more resentful. The ones that are, right? And the ones that aren't. It's not a problem. But the ones that are so anti-immigration because they've convinced themselves that that is the root of all evil in America will look at you differently if your name is Francisco Guerra IV or John Gomez, in spite of John being a Harvard guy. They won't care.
Yeah.
And that is something that I'm very acutely aware of while I'm picking juries. In the rural counties, dude, I just picked a jury in the 20 miles north of here where, 90% of those folks are white German people. They'll look at you funny.
Oh,
No question.
wow. That's really telling. And it's funny because we're working with a company that's doing our recording for when people call in and they're on hold for a period of time. And we have a Spanish version, we have an English version, because we do get probably like you guys, a pretty large number of Spanish, intakes and clients. And they were showing me the scripts, one English, one Spanish. And for new clients, they had for both English and Spanish, immigration status is, you don't have to worry about it. Under the law, you're protected. Everyone has rights. And, we speak Spanish. And just, exactly what you're saying, I said, let's take that out of the English one. Because that's going to be like a trigger for some of these folks, like
Right.
they hear that, they're just shutting down. And it's unfortunate.
Well, and it's even worse for clients, Gomi, right? I mean, if you have in some parts of Texas, and I love my state, brother, but it's just our reality. You have a non-English speaker as a client. I don't care what happened, dude. They're not going to give that person on. They're just not going to give them money. They don't care that they're even here legally. They're thinking, you know what? You're here in this country that my fathers fought for, not yours. And this is an English speaking country. You learn to speak English or you get the hell out. And those clients, I mean, it's difficult for me to take a case like that to trial because they're going to crucify them, regardless of the merits. It's terrible.
Do you have, like, say, you're sitting around with the client and maybe the referring lawyer, and you say, okay, we're set for trial over here. And I don't know what the name of, say it's like Greenburg, Texas. I don't know. And that's going to happen because, they don't speak English. Do you have that conversation and just say, look, here's the reality?
Absolutely, I do. And I say, look, and I take them through phases of stuff, right? Through how, I give this speech on closing arguments. It's called Breaking the Golden Rule. And it has to do with how folks like you and I, although we know we can't violate the golden rule and tell a juror, how would you feel if you were my client? You and I get as close to the edge as possible, right? And so getting the process of explaining that to a non-English speaker sounds something like, how do I get folks that are supposed to be a jury of your peers that don't look like you, that can't empathize with any part of your being, not your color, not how you got here, not why you've been here for 30 years working in a field and can't speak English, to any of those things, to somehow be sympathetic with you and think, how would I feel if that was me? So here's what you have to look, and I weigh pros and cons, and I inform them. And I say, but that is a very real thing. And to tell you the truth, I don't even know what your chances are until I look at what the veneer looks like. And some of these counties, Gummy, I'll be, they're counties that have Hispanic people, but they don't vote, right? So they don't make it to the jury pool. And I've got 85, 90% white Anglo-Saxon German folks, good people, but just won't be able to identify with my non-English speaker. They just won't.
Wow. And in Texas, is immigration status admissible?
It's not, but it's.
But they know, right?
They do, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's not that they know, they assume, right? They will assume that if your client is dark and doesn't speak English, that they must be illegal.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And so, if you were to look back at, there's going to be like a lot of young Frank Guerras like watching this, and the idea is we're really trying to build up this community of peers that do what we do together. What advice would you give to the young Frank Guerra, the young Francisca Guerra, or Francesca Guerra who's watching this, like a young up and coming eager Latino lawyer? What advice would you give them?
I think that in part because of where I came from, which was small, almost 100% Hispanic, almost 100% Catholic. A lot of the adversity that I probably should have faced came from I didn't face it because of ignorance. I just didn't know any better, right? But when I started knowing better and I learned that maybe people thought things about me because of where I came from or because I was Hispanic, then I kind of created this potential ceiling of where I thought I could go or not go. And when I passed that ceiling, often I felt like a poser, right? Imposter syndrome. And what I learned, Gomi, is that it's funny how things happen. And I'm sure you feel this way too. even when I went into situations that were intimidating because those people weren't like me. And a lot of these places we practice up north, dude, I'm the only Hispanic person in the entire courtroom, right? But the same thing always happens. It's uncomfortable at the beginning. We do what we do, which we work our tail off harder than anybody else. They start respecting us for who we are, and eventually we dominate the entire group every single time. And so the advice I would give to people that are looking at this that are like us is there is no ceiling. There's only hard work, determination, and going forward. Okay. There is no such thing as a place where we cannot go. Period. That's as simple as I see it. We just may have to modify the way we get there sometimes if obstacles get in the way. But that obstacle is not going to be because we're Hispanic or because we're Spanish speakers or where we came from. And
I
you and
like
I are, brother.
And so I want to give a pitch. I'm on the board of directors of Shades of Mass. And, for those of you that don't know, this is an organization really committed to increasing representation of diverse lawyers, Black and brown lawyers in, litigations of significance. And, the numbers are pretty startling about, our place in those big cases. And this group has been put together to kind of change that. But this year, the annual conference is in Houston, September 19th to 21st. And I feel like we need more Vatos Locos over there, holding it down. And so if it's in your Texas, maybe you could get a little bit of your crew out there and we could catch up.
Okay, I'll send you an email I've heard of the organization a couple times, but I don't have any information on what's happening. So
Yeah.
send me the link and I'll get a bunch of people out there.
Yeah, that'd be good, man. It'd be good to hang out and see you. Well, kind of closing, we have here an all hands meeting. We have everybody come in for the firm. And then a lot of times with our new people, we'll ask them a significant questions such as, who is your hero? What is your superpower? If you could have, dinner with anyone in history, who would it be? So choose one of those three and give us an answer.
So if you ever played 20 questions with people, you always get those types of questions, right? And always I have found that over time my answers will change to any of those type things, right? But I think that probably the easiest for me to answer that has stayed most consistent is what is your superpower? What is it about you? One of my friends in college, we were talking about something, and then someone said, "Man, what is it about you, Frank?" And he answered for me. He goes, "Man, dude, he just loves people, and he cares about others more than himself." And that sounds cliche-ish, right? But I think the day I lose sight of my humility and my roots and my people, you and I are always kidding, blood in, blood out, raza. My identity of where I came from is the day I'll stop being Frank Guerra. And I've been able to, most people, we've got a WhatsApp group of my entire graduating class of 1988. We started during COVID. Every single living member is still on there. They call me Canelito, right? They know I'm a lawyer, but they've never Googled me. They have no idea what we do here, right? And that to me, Gomi, is a badge of honor that those folks that I went to school with, we grew up in mierda, man, right? We were nobody in anybody's eyes but our own. They still think of me as Frankie. And that's what they even call me, Frankie. And that's what I think my superpower is, my ability to still be the kid that graduated from Roma High School, that worked in the fields and worked at the concrete plant, had two grandfathers who taught me how to be a man. And I'll always be that kid for everyone. That's what it is for me.
I love it. That's that just, being yourself and being true to yourself is maybe one of the most overlooked but most powerful super hero qualities you can have. And I agree, man. You are just a real dude, and it's always fun hanging out with you and fun talking to you. If our listeners or viewers want to find you, like, how can we learn more about you or the law firm?
So obviously on the internet, the law firm is guerrallp.com. And in today's age, I mean, and I called you when I had this vision about how it should be. We started getting your newsletters, and I told Watsy, I said, hey man, we need to have a website. It's more like Gomi's, right? We started doing the bios like you did. Remember you had all those bios. And so that girl that started that for me came with me, and she's just fantastic. And so the grasshoppers, the Jedi, and so I've got code names for everybody. I've got the partners, the 3 board certified appellate guys that are in-house. They're called the Brain Trust. All the associates are called the Jedi, and then the interns are called the grasshoppers. And all of that stuff is all on the website, guerrallp.com.
Oh, super cool.
Otherwise, dude, my cell is 210-569-3459. Anybody can call me anytime they want. The building is right off of 281. You can't miss it. It says Guerra LLP. It's easy to find me. San Antonio is a small town, brother.
Yeah, it's a good town, though. How do you like it now that she talked you into moving there?
So for the first 5 years, I spent it in the Valley, right? But San Antonio has always been a fantastic place to live because it's a big city with a small town feeling, but it's also a great place to raise a family, and I was blessed in that the boys went to a very, very, very white privileged public school named Alamo Heights. And the reason I put them there is because it's surrounded by Kent Grow, and it was back then the highest level of district is 5A, so it was a 4A high school. So my boys could actually play sports, ran varsity track all 4 years, played baseball, played football, but the school did a fantastic job of preparing them for college, right? And so when it comes to raising a family, dude, this town has been fantastic. Our judiciary, if you wonder about Hispanic and Latino influence, our entire judiciary, with the exception of one, are all female Latinas, bro.
Oh, wow.
And our court of appeals are all female Latinas. And it is, and if you look at the firm, not only am I growing a bunch of badass Hispanic people, and we just hired our first African American. She's badass, but also there's a lot of power females in this firm. Starting with Shalimar Wallace, I try and hire people from back home when I can. We've got a double Ivy named Alexis Garcia. She was Miss Edinburgh 2009, but then Cornell undergrad, Columbia Law School, total badass. So the female judiciary in Bexar County knows what I'm doing with the younger female Latina and non-Latina lawyers and throwing them in the water, and they love it, dude. So great place to practice law. Very, very objective judges, pretty middle of the road. Jurors, for the most part, are great because of military city. We stay pretty consistent. So I've thoroughly enjoyed. We've been here since 1996, and man, I get to go home every other weekend for 3 hours, work at the ranch, build a fence or two, have Grandma Nifa spank me for fun. And then same for her parents. We get to go up for 3 hours to Waco, Texas. And it's been fantastic, man. God has a funny way of putting you where you need to be, ¿verdad?
Yeah, definitely. He may take you on some side roads and some through some mud, and you might get a flat tire or two, but eventually you get to where you need to be.
Amen, brother.
Amen, man. Well, I appreciate you spending time with us. Really look forward to sharing this conversation with, our brothers and sisters all over this country, and look forward. Hopefully I get to see you in Houston, man. That'd be a lot of fun.
I'll see you in about a month and a half, Gomi. Appreciate you having me over, man.
All right, brother. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Latino podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.